one thing I wanted to ask you was about whether there are any, as someone who, I think a lot of comics have suffered with mental health problems.
Sure.
My feeling is that almost all people do. It's just that comics are allowed to talk about it on stage. I don't necessarily subscribe to the kind of comics are all secretly depressed theory.
Sure.
But for those of us that wear it on our sleeve a bit more obviously, I was wondering, are there any creative benefits to depression, or is it all, you know what I mean, is it all just terrible? Like, I often sort of I'm a sort of chronic anxiety sufferer, and I've often thought to myself, like, if there was a choice, like a blue pill and a red pill for, you can either get rid of all the anxiety or have all the success that the anxiety may drive you towards. Like, which one would I do?
Oh, wow.
You know, would it be better to be terribly unsuccessful, like as unsuccessful as one might secretly fear one is, and yet happy? Like, what would the trade-off be? Would that be worth it?
But maybe maybe the anxiety is also driving the like importance of being successful, right? So without that, you would be happy and not stressed.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you feel? What's your take on?
I mean, I would say you were asking like what is a positive side of depression. You get a lot of downtime. It is a lot of time to sit around and think.
Okay.
Because you can't really do anything else.
Sure.
Yeah.
But is that... Because I know in the brief periods of depression I've had, I wouldn't have really wanted to think in a creative way.
Sure.
I'd have wanted to sort of avoid everything. I'd have felt like, oh, now, like, this would be a perfect time for me to do some work trying to describe the funniness of this, and I can't, which means I'm even more of a piece of shit.
Well, the interesting thing to me
sorry, I just got a pity from someone in the audience.
Yeah, I don't know, for me, I've always felt like comedy and sadness and even anxiety are kind of two sides of the same coin, where it's like when I'm really depressed or anxious, I'm sort of like, you know, why am I even here? What am I doing? And then that is essentially stand-up too, where you're essentially asking, why are we all here? What are we doing? Why do we do things this way? They're both kind of micro-analyzing. One is very self-directed, like anxiety and depression is, you know, like I'm a piece of shit. Why am I so bad at everything? But I feel like stand-up is sort of inflicting that on the world more, or even maybe on yourself. So I think, I don't know, for me, it's kind of using the same conduits in the brain, and one of them goes in a more just self-defeating flat line direction, and then the other one's like, okay, but like, if I'm kind of trying to explain this to another person of like what's going on in my head, how would I do that and do it in a way where they're not immediately going to walk away and be like, you know what, this is kind of a bummer. I'm going to go watch Real Housewives.
Sure. Yeah. Is there, I was thinking about the kind of the hustle necessary to become a comedian and the drive required and the literal driving and, you know, the traveling and all of those things. How did those sit with periods of depression?
Not great. I feel like there was a period where I was, quote unquote, like my career was going well and things were really picking up. And this was like, you know, a number of years after I kind of started talking more about mental health in my act. And it felt like things imploded a little bit, where it was almost like I was being rewarded for being really vulnerable on stage, but then those same demons were making it really hard to show up to do stand-up. Where it was like, as I was talking about anxiety and depression on stage, my anxiety and depression were getting worse off stage. And I was like, you know, canceling shows and not able to get through the day. So I think I really had to reckon with like, do you have to create boundaries just to self-preserve versus just turning everything into material and then thinking I'm a robot and I can just show up and deliver these jokes with no impact as a human. Yeah,
especially if the comedy world is saying, hey, we really like it when you kind of eviscerate yourself in front of us. Yeah.
And I almost feel like that's been a trend that stand-up has taken, or, you know, even like hour-long shows where it's sort of like a vulnerability contest of like, how real could he get? He was sitting the whole time and he didn't even want laughs. You know, like I just feel like it's kind of turned into, in some regards, a pissing contest of like, you know, and you know, that's any cultural trend. We go in different waves of things, but it is funny to me that it's sort of like we pick a thing and then we run it into the ground a little bit.
Yeah, it's extraordinary that. I wonder how... I see that a lot at the Edinburgh Festival, whereby there's just so many, like 3,000 comedy shows in town, that every year it seems certain newspapers or journalists will get together and go, we've identified the theme of this year's festival.
Okay.
So it's this, it's about this. And then I'm at the festival thinking, well, that's one of the themes. I think you're really just going for copy. And the other thing is, if people do often do, like one of the running jokes of the Edinburgh Festival, I don't know if it applies here in the US, is that people do comics do shows about their dead dads. It's like, it's a dead dad show. You're enjoying the show, and then 40 minutes of the way through, their dad dies. And it turns out, are people familiar with that? Do you get, no, that's a thing. Get yourselves to Edinburgh. It's a lot of fun. I think those sort of tropes, I think they're not necessarily negative, because actually what's happening is comics are inspiring other comics by going, the origins maybe of that pissing contest are in comics going, oh, wow, I can be that vulnerable.
Yes.
But then it just becomes a little bit laughable when there's 40 people doing it.
Oh, yeah, because I remember, there was a point where I was really into Twitter and would, tweet a lot about mental health jokes. And I remember, going in spirals where I was just like, her depression jokes are better than mine. It's like, she has a suicide hotline joke and I haven't called them, and what does that say about me?
God.
I just feel like you can really go off the rails, even with being real, quote unquote, real. Yeah.
That's hard. I remember the second show I ever wrote was called Another Lovely Crisis, and it was all about my anxiety. And it was almost impossible to write, because I would sit down and go, let's focus on all the times I've been anxious, and then I'd end up really anxious and unable to write anything. So I think that's part of what impresses me so much about your ability to go, that bit and that concept, and I am safe and preserved from that, and there are boundaries.
I mean, I also think, like, just what you're saying about anxiety, it is so messy, and it isn't like something you can neatly package into like a neat setup and punchline. So I think I was also noticing, like, when you write a joke, it's so clean. There's like an in and an out, and it's like, here's what I want you guys to take away from this. And mental health is not like that at all. So I think it was also it was a way to package it that also made it feel a little bit like I had a sense of control over it, since it's something that really is outside of your control.
Yes.
So much of the time.
Yes, that's what. There's a famous quote, isn't there, about comedy being an attempt to comedy often being an attempt to control the way in which people laugh at you.
Yes.
And I think there's probably a parallel there with your comedy being an attempt to control the way in which you get to navigate those elements of your psyche. Yeah.
Because I think often I feel like my brain makes it hard to show up to my life. So I think it was like finding a way to be like, how can I take these parts of my brain and force them to show up on my terms?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a beautiful way of thinking about it. Did you ever? I know you've talked about therapy on stage. Mm-hmm. Have you ever had that moment? I think probably a lot of therapized, is that a word? Comics who've undergone therapy have had of going, oh, if I get happy, will I still be able to do the job?
Yeah. I don't know, because I think I actually, when I first started stand-up, I think one thing I left out was I had been coming out of a very depressive patch that I was struggling with in college, where I had an eating disorder and I had to take time off of school, and I was put on antidepressants for the first time. And I think this is a common experience with people who go on, SSRIs for maybe the first time in their life, but everything suddenly, was like in color to me. It was almost like I had experienced the world in black and white, and suddenly I was like seeing colors, and I was like, wow, is this what everyone else is feeling all the time? And I think it just gave me this, like, there's always an initial honeymoon period with these drugs where I felt this boost of sort of like, oh my gosh, now I can really live. And I think that is also kind of what helped me give me the confidence to try stand up for the first time, because I don't know if without that I would have been like, this is really something I can go for.